to record.
Hello, welcome again to Restart Your Business, Recharge Your Life. My name is Anna and I'm Avila Spaces Community Manager. Our today guest, Alex Cookman, is a self-employed consultant. Hello Alex, thanks for joining us.
Most welcome, good to be here.
Before we jump to our topic, can you tell us a little bit about what you do, what your company does, and what's your daily routine?
Of course, yeah. My name's Alex. I'm a 38-year-old accountant, consultant. I've been here in Lisbon for a couple of years, working here at Avila Spaces, and I work on global accounting and audit projects, clients around the world, mostly based out of London, but also other countries. My typical work day is about 9 till 6, depend more or less. But I'm really flexible in terms of how I work during the week. Got a couple of young kids, a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, so I spend time with them. Lots of school drop-offs, pick-ups, all that kind of good stuff.
So our topic today, it's about being a digital nomad, but you weren't always a digital nomad. Before we jump into that, can you tell us about when you used to travel the world, working for big companies? What was it like? Can you remember that time?
Just about, yeah. I've been doing this job for about a year, but previously I worked for a number of global accounting firms. So I was quite fortunate in that gave me the chance to do a lot of travel. So I'm a Londoner, but I left London 5 years ago. I went from London down to South America. I was in Chile for a year and a half, working on a big project out there. I then changed companies and went to Copenhagen in Denmark, so where I was for a couple of years, and then did a transfer from Denmark to Portugal. I finished with that company about a year ago, so it's my 1 year anniversary of being a digital nomad.
Working at big companies, we know that sometimes the work-life balance, it's a bit tricky, not always the good. Did you feel that when you worked at that companies? Didn't you feel that, or was it like?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of benefits of both ways of working, whether it's an employee or working for yourself. Certainly on the work-life balance part, that was much harder. The last couple of years have been really tough anyway, with COVID and lockdowns, all that kind of thing. But it was really difficult for me to manage my life with work and family and kids when working for a company that has very specific and quite rigid demands. I remember my first job out of uni, going back a few years now. We had really fixed working hours, 8 till 6. Doesn't matter whether you have other things to do, whether you want to be flexible, come in earlier, later. And that kind of works when you're young, but as you get older and you have kids, there are other things that you have to kind of manage.
Of course.
It was really difficult. I remember my diary was full of calls that I didn't put in there, that other people put in there. My boss, team members, other teams. Lots of time on calls, not being very productive. So it was a bit of a reason to think again about how I could do it, how I could work differently.
You were telling me off the record that in Chile, for instance, the working hours are crazy because you're not always very productive. Things go into the night. Was it hard with the family outside of your country, even though you weren't a digital nomad, but outside of your country with that routine? Was it hard for the family especially?
Yeah, it was harder for the family than for me, I'd say. So the working hours, they were really long. So the start wasn't that early, maybe 8:30, but as you mentioned, not necessarily getting started properly until 9, 10 o'clock, and then working way into the evening. And then during busy periods, that could easily be 8, 9, 10 o'clock, working at weekends. And again, you can kind of manage that, and it's not the end of the world, but if you've got a family at home who haven't got a network, who haven't got very many friends, because they're new to the country, haven't got a lot of freedom to do other things, then they can feel quite lonely as well. So that was really difficult.
Is it hard to unplug from work when you work such long hours, for instance? When you get home, do you still think about it? It's hard for you, like, to have fun. Was before.
Yeah, it's just very tiring. I don't want to sound too negative. There are lots of benefits about working for a company, but when you work really long hours and you haven't got the flexibility, once you get to 7 o'clock, you can be really drained. You haven't had the time to relax or go for a walk or whatever. Now I can be as flexible as I need to be, and that's been a really positive way for me working. and so you can really mix the work with leisure. I go to the gym every day, or most days when I'm being good, and I can go for an hour and a half if I want to. Sometimes if I'm really busy, I can't go, and that's how life is. But I can go and get the kids from school. I can, be with them for 2 hours or 3 hours, and then work in the evening.
That's where I was going next. Was that long hours, not having that flexibility, that made you give up on a big company and start your own business? How did that decision come? What did you feel? You were telling me it was during the pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I thought about it a little bit even before that. So when I moved to Portugal, I considered coming here as a freelancer, as a consultant. And I made quite a bit of progress in trying to get different clients and whatever else. And in the end, I chose to, at the last minute, stick with the company and do the kind of easier thing. Right? I think it was partway through the first lockdown, maybe, with COVID, and I was working crazy hours. It was the end of the company's fiscal year, so there's lots of work on. A couple of kids, 2 doing homeschooling, 1 a bit older, so it was more autonomous, but still, we had laptops here and iPads here, and everyone trying to just work, and deadlines, every day, and it was just too much. It was impossible. So at that point, having already thought about it quite a lot, it was quite easy for me to go back to that way of thinking and work for myself.
When you did start your company, sorry.
It's okay.
Was it hard to make that decision because you were telling the long hours, the crazy schedule? Was it hard for you to make the decision? You thought about it already, but was it hard to say, no, I'm going to turn in my letter, go home and start something new?
No, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, I worked with some really, really amazing people, had really good bosses, worked on interesting projects. I learned lots, so I was really grateful for the experience of working for a big company. But at that moment, where you can't really, that you can't go on doing what you're doing, it wasn't really a hard decision. I knew that I had to make a change. I had to work differently, work more flexibly. The flip side of that is obviously uncertainty. When you work for yourself, you haven't got that kind of comfort blanket of the guaranteed salary, the iPhone they give to you.
Yes.
When I quit and I had to give my iPhone in, I was very sad. So there's kind of little benefits that being with a company just gives to you. But it wasn't a hard decision. Not having to wear a suit to work.
Yes.
It's also a benefit, right? These kind of things that just make you feel a bit more free.
Yes, but a lot of people have that in mind but never do it because people are afraid. They get very nervous to turn in the iPhone, turn in the computer. Do you have some advices? Did someone give you advices for that, for instance?
Yeah, I was lucky in that one of my best friends has been here for about 6 years now, and he did the same thing. So 6 years ago, had a similar kind of story. He's worked for himself for that period from Lisbon. So we talked it through, more than once. So that was really helpful. I'd say it's really normal to be scared. If you're used to doing something and working in a certain way for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it's obvious that if you suddenly change, there's going to be uncertainty. How do I get clients? How do I win business? How do I deliver? How do I do all of the admin that comes along with having a business, having a company? It's the unknown. It's scary. But be brave. I'd say if you can see into the future, like 3 months or 6 months, and have some certainty that you have the income to survive and the space to give it a try, then give it a try.
So were you ready to give a step back if things weren't great, if the business didn't deliver? Were you ready to go back? Did you have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D?
Yeah, I mean, plan B is the obvious, just as you say, just go back to what you were doing. I know the world isn't yet back to normal, but people are hiring. Say if my business dried up, next week or next month, there are companies out there I could go to and apply for. There's no reason I can't go back to being an employee.
Of course.
So that option's always there for you. So if you are interested in working this way, give it a try and see what happens.
So which were the little steps that you have to take to open your company, what was like the first thing you did, the little steps? What happened 1 year ago?
I would say the first thing I did was find a client, like a main client I knew would give me the 3 months or 6 months of work to do and income to pay for everything. Second thing is get a really good accountant. If you do that, it will make your life so much easier.
That was what you told me, a good accountant. Yeah, makes a difference.
Just having someone to just talk you through what you need to do. Here's the papers that you need. You get him or her do all that kind of work for you. Obviously, you need to give them a hand with the papers that they need, but they do all the admin for you, the company creation, get a bank account for you, get you a tax number, all that stuff they take care of. And that means you're free then to look for business, look for clients, and to do the work.
You were telling me that you chose your company's name. You don't even use it, but you chose from a list.
Yeah.
That's very funny.
Well, it's really easy here in Portugal to set up a company.
Yeah.
So within a week, 10 days, if you choose a company name off the list, it's really, it flies for the system. So I picked a company name because the word estrela, or star in English, is an area that I live in Lisbon. So it sounded cool. And,
it sounded very cool. I thought you had the idea.
No, I'm not that creative.
It's very cool. You were telling me it's easy in Portugal, but the Portuguese people in general have the idea that everything needs so much work, so much paperwork. We go to take care of taxes and we are there for 5 hours on a line. Didn't you think that way?
I didn't feel the need for paperwork was that bad. The queuing, yes. So if you go to the tax authority, you need to basically have in your mind, I'll be there all morning or all afternoon. You go in, they're really polite and helpful, but you take a ticket, take a number, you take a seat and you wait for your turn. And it could be a little while. But the paperwork requirements weren't particularly difficult.
So you give people the courage to come to Portugal, open their businesses, because it's not that hard?
No, and again, I had the help. I was lucky in that when I first came across, I transferred from Denmark. I came across with my employer, and they did lots of the work for me. So they had my papers on file. The HR team did a lot of work for me. So I was lucky in that I didn't need to do some of the heavy lifting. And then when I went freelance a year ago, my accountant did lots of the work. So you can really make it easy for yourself by just getting people to do it for you as a service.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't try and do it all yourself and struggle and suffer. Just get
That's why many people give up, because they don't have the help that they need. Right.
Get the right accountant, one that has a lawyer that they work with to do all the legal side. You get the financial side, and then you're good.
We already touched that point when you told us that when you became a freelancer, you can work the same hours, but you have more flexibility. How did that change your life? What differences do you see now?
It changed it a lot. I work the same now as I did before. It could be more, could be less, but on average about the same. But I have complete freedom in my week. Obviously my clients give me deadlines. I might have a project that says, in a month's time you have to deliver the project. Between now and that month deadline, I do whatever I want. I can work from morning till night. I can take a day off and watch Netflix. I can pick the kids up. We went to the beach on a Friday 2 weeks ago because we felt like it.
Yes.
It's a town called Cascais near Lisbon, if you don't know where it is. Just took Friday off to go to the beach.
That's the big difference. It's because many people think digital nomads just work at cafes near paradisiac beaches, but you actually have kind of a normal work day. You come to Avila.
Yeah.
What does a Cowork give you to feel that normality, to feel that you still have a job, that you don't work from bed? What does a Cowork give you?
So someone like Avila gives you a base to work from, a place where you feel that separation from home and your working life. It's a great community, so really people that are like-minded in a similar situation, great facilities. So it's really a normal working day, like I used to have when I worked for a company in many respects. I just don't have the rules around it, when I start and when I finish. who I have to tell what I'm doing. Those kind of bits aren't part of the deal. But it does give you that stability.
Did you experience work from home as a freelancer, or did you come right away to Avila?
It was one of the first things I did. So when I was looking to start out, got my accountant, I met with him and talked about the various different things that I should do with the business. One of the costs that he assumed I'd have would be a co-working space. So I saw a few different places, chose Avila immediately because it's a great place to work from. But I didn't have the work from home experience until COVID, and when it was kind of forced on us. And
of course.
I was glad to come back when that settled down.
Do you recommend working from a co-work space to other nomads? We have a lot of nomads in our community, of course, but if you could give like 3 reasons for them to come here, what would you say to them for them not to work every day at a cafe, for instance?
It depends. I mean, I would certainly say having kind of a fixed community is really, really important. I mean, everyone here works hard. Mostly works hard.
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody. But you can grab a coffee with people that you know, or that you get to know really well over working with them for weeks or months. Have good conversations, networking. So that I think is different to working in various different cafes. You don't get that kind of continuity, that kind of connection. So that's been my favourite thing of having Avila, I think.
Is it easy to find, for instance, clients on this kind of environment?
Yes, I've had to ask for help often. There are people here from different countries, Angola, Austria, the UK, like myself, Spain, and I can take a coffee with someone and ask questions about a project. That's really, really helpful. One of the guys that I work near sits behind me. He's helped me a lot on an Angolan project, so that I wouldn't have if I worked in a cafe or at home on my own.
Yes.
So that's been beneficial.
Another part of our conversation regards the kids, the family, because we always think that a nomad is someone very young that stays a few weeks here, a few weeks there. You actually live in Portugal for some time now with your family, but before that your family also moved with you to Chile, to Copenhagen. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What do you think? We have a lot of good things from that, but the downsides for a family that moves a lot.
I would say that there are 2 obvious things. One is that once you have kids, the world gets a lot smaller in terms of where you can live, because the first thing you think about, where's safe? Where is the schooling really good? Or where can I afford schooling in English if the language of the country isn't in English? And straight away the world map kind of shrinks. The second thing is you think necessarily much more long term, and you think in cycles around the school year. So you can't say, I'll spend a few weeks here, a few months there. Maybe when they're really young you could, but as soon as they're 4 and they're in school, you generally commit to a school year because you want that continuity for them. So it makes you think a lot more clearly about what things that matter and how you plan to move around.
The language is a big barrier for young kids. Your kids are what age now?
So I've got a daughter who's 9 and a son who's 5.
The language in so many different countries, is that a barrier? The kids don't care that much, they learn fast. What do you think about that?
Kids are amazing little creatures. They learn so quickly. So we went to live in Chile. My daughter was 4, and she learned Spanish in about 3 months. It was just completely insane.
Faster than you?
Well, I was lucky in that I did it at school and university. So I learned it in a sort of academic kind of setting. But she learned it much by playing, having friends and going to daycare and nursery and all that stuff. My son was only 6 months, so he didn't really do much speaking, but he was listening all the time, and that's really good for him. My son then learned Danish in Denmark.
That's very hard.
Which is a really hard language. And then he forgot it all in about 3 months.
Oh, really?
Every single last word when we came to live in Portugal. But they're both in an English-speaking school that's both English and Portuguese. And at my son's age, it's also French. so he does the 3 languages.
Okay.
And they're both doing really, really well. My daughter's Portuguese sounds like yours.
Really?
That's after 2 years.
Yes.
Again, she's really, really gifted with languages.
Mm-hmm.
And my son, he's a bit younger, so he's kind of trying to catch up, but he's doing really well. So.
And when it comes, for instance, you want to have a date with your wife, what do you do with the kids? Because you don't have your family here. What do you do? Is it different from when they were very young in Chile, for instance? Is it less hard now here in Portugal? What do you do?
No, that's really the hardest thing about having young kids. It's not having the natural network. If you live near your the grandparents or aunties or really long childhood friends, if you want to have an evening off, you take the kids to the grandparents, and they have them. You haven't got to ask. They love having them. If you want them to have them for a weekend, don't have them. When you're traveling as a family, it's just you. That's it. As they've gotten older, that's become easier because you can get a childminder or a babysitter for an evening, and that's fine. But when we were in Chile, it was really hard. My son was 6 months old, so he's breastfeeding, and we left there when he was about 2, so still really young. And it's really hard to leave a 1-year-old or 2-year-old with a stranger, even for 3-4 hours. So you spend almost your entire time as a family, in a way that wouldn't be the case if you were near sort of grandparents, because they could have them. And
isn't it hard for a family to always be together?
Yes. Yeah. Not having that kind of that release of that space to kind of take an hour out or an evening out or a weekend out. That's the hardest thing, I think.
Is it easy for you guys as a family? Do you make your network like with another family? Do you hang out with other families, or do you kind of, when you move around, you find your friends, your wife finds her friends?
So here it's a bit different in that we knew a couple of really good friends here in Lisbon already, but generally you'll find that the networks that you have are linked to the school that your kids go to. So there's a big network of expats in Lisbon, with it being an English school or a partly English school. Most families speak really, really good English, and with the kids going on play dates and birthday parties and hanging out in the park after school, your network quickly becomes focused on the school. And for that reason, you tend to also live near the school as well. So I'd say finding a good school is probably the first thing to do if you're thinking about moving somewhere else, whether it's Lisbon, different city. Find a good school, good community, good network, and that will help you to settle.
So you never thought about homeschooling, for instance? No.
Oh, that's an easy one. That was never something that we kind of looked at. They've always been in sort of traditional schools.
Yes. Never a Portuguese school, for instance? Always international?
Well, we've never known how long we'll be in any one location, so it's made sense to send them to international schools for the English continuity. When we first came to Lisbon, my son did spend a year in a Portuguese nursery because in his current school there wasn't space for him in that year, and it was great, really good school, really friendly staff. He learned Portuguese, I think, more quickly because he was exposed to it all the time. They spoke to him in just Portuguese.
Was that hard for you as a parent to go like for school meetings with the teachers, or it was all English?
No, that was all Portuguese. I learned Portuguese so, but quite quickly because I spoke Spanish for a long time, so I can read Portuguese quite easily. Meetings and that kind of thing have been harder, but it's taken me a bit more time. But for me, I found it not too bad.
Do the kids sometimes ask questions? Do they remember that they lived in another country, like your smallest?
No, my daughter does. My son doesn't. So my son left the UK at 6 months old. He's never known anything other than living abroad. That for him is just normal. My daughter does remember her old nursery in London, and she went to school for I think 6 weeks before we went to Chile. And she remembers her teacher, for instance.
Really?
We were staying with my parents in West London. She remembers that area. She has memories of that. But I think that they're fading. So for more than half her life, she's been away. And for my son, it's been all that he's known, pretty much.
So do you feel like your kids, for instance, are like citizens of the world, not more like English citizens?
That's the reality for them.
Yes.
And that's For some people, that's a worry. It's not for me so much. They don't feel tied to one particular place. You know, they've lived in 4 countries now. My son's only 5 years old, and the benefits they have are in, you know, how to adapt, how to change languages and culture. I was lucky as a kid in that I went on lots of vacations with my family, but vacations are very different to living somewhere. I mean, they get to know somewhere as a local almost, and that gives them a different kind of skill set than they would have if they just lived in London.
So that's the important part. They have skills that someone who lives his entire life in one country, in one location, doesn't have.
They get to figure out, you know, different situations. They've been to different types of school, different kinds of city, different societies. You know, Copenhagen is very, very different from Chile.
Very different, yeah.
But my daughter's done an incredible job at figuring out how to thrive in both those different locations.
You were mentioning the other countries that you lived in. Portugal is one of the top 5 countries for nomads. What does Portugal have that other countries don't for nomads, for instance? Do you feel some differences?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the government's doing a lot to try and encourage people like me and younger people, younger nomads, to come and live here. So lots of incentives are being offered. Great weather, you know, friendly people. The cost of living is really, really low, really good. Apart from rental costs, that's not not so good. If you live in certain areas, particularly around international schools, that can be a bit tricky. But on balance, I think Portugal's doing a really good job, and it's given us the best balance between all the different parts of life that have to work in order for you to...
Portugal gives you what kind of incentives?
So in terms of tax incentives, for instance.
Not to get into much detail, just for us to know.
No, of course. No. So if you want to come to Portugal and you haven't lived here before, for the first 10-year period, you can have a bit more tax efficiency.
Okay.
And after 10 years, then you're settled and you're Portuguese, so that kind of falls away. But that kind of thing is a little incentive to make it easier financially.
Do they give you incentives for kids, for instance, for your kids, or they're just normal kids in school?
They're normal kids. I mean, our kids go to an international school, so that's what we pay for, that's our choice.
Yes.
That's fine. But the level of schooling here is good, so it's really good. So if we knew we'd be here for a long, long time, the Portuguese school system would be great.
Do you see any differences from the other countries, the way your kids learn at school, or being in an international school, it's the same?
It's very similar.
It's very similar. Okay.
I'd say the public school system in Denmark is very, very different to here. But then society there is very, very different.
Yes.
But when you're in international school, you'll find that it's generally pretty similar.
Okay. We are getting to the end of our conversation, unfortunately.
Of course.
Just a reflection to end. You said you are a nomad for a year now.
Yep.
It marks your year anniversary here at Avila as well.
It's my Avila birthday.
Yeah, it's your birthday.
It is,
yes. After all, do you think you make the right decision? It was a good change for your family. How do you see it now?
So far, definitely, without hesitation. I have more flexible free time. I can be with the kids in the afternoon. I can take a day off here or there. I often work weekends. You know, that's the downside. So you have to roll with it and be able to work when it makes sense. But on balance, I'm definitely glad that I made the change. I'm enjoying it.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Just one last question. Where can we find you? Where can you find your company? Online, here?
LinkedIn. So
LinkedIn.
Alexander Cookman, based in London or Lisbon.
Okay.
I don't use my brand. My company's a brand, but I sell myself.
You sell yourself, right? So we are getting to the end of our conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Most welcome. Thank you.
Today we learned a little bit more about digital nomads, how to move with the family, how to balance your work life. We'll be back in a month with another guest. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.